Hi, you guys. It's me, Miss Fry. Chapter 60. I'm so excited. I'm super, super excited. But as we've been, or maybe it's just me, there's some bittersweetness to this. And I've kind of avoided this all day because I don't want it to end. But listen, that's okay. We can handle it, and we're going to enjoy the story and enjoy this journey we've been on together with it. And then I think tomorrow I'm starting another one, and it's going to be a different story altogether, but different is good, I think. And we're going to enjoy it. We're going to learn from that story as well, okay? All right, so Lady Thornton is, as Ada called it, is trapped. And she knew what she had to do. Jamie said, so she can't talk because she's too sad? He always gets it just right, doesn't he? All right, chapter 60. Jamie had already fed Mrs. Rochester, Bovril, and the hens. I got dressed in my thickest socks and warmest sweater. I took my special box from the bookshelf and dug out the shillings I'd saved. I stuffed them into my pocket. Downstairs, I made breakfast for Jamie and me. Susan was still asleep, and Lady Thornton was just as Jamie said, eyes open, immobile, suffering. I squeezed her hand hard, and she jumped but looked away. She's scary, Jamie whispered. I handed him a note I'd scrawled. Scrawled means to write something really quickly. When Susan wakes up, give her this. Only don't you wake her. Wait till she gets up on her own. Jamie read the note and looked up at me. Why? I was putting on my coat and hat. Where are you going? It's a secret, I said. It's for the war. Jamie's eyes widened. Don't worry, I told him. It's perfectly safe. Like Ruth's job? Yes, I said. I kissed him. Do the barn chores for me and help Susan as much as you can. And don't worry, I'll be gone a few days, but I'll come back. In the village, the charred wreck of the Messerschmitt still blocked the high street. I gave it a wide berth. I wasn't about to look inside. I had the address from Maggie's letters. I had the address from Maggie's letters. Oh, Ada! I had the fare. I wondered if the station master, who knew me, would ask questions, but he didn't. I'd never ridden a train alone, let alone 3 trains with changes in between. It didn't matter. The trains were packed with soldiers, as always, and the soldiers kept going out of their way to be kind to me. They always found me a seat. Some gave me cups of tea. One pressed a piece of chocolate into my hand. Invincible Ada. Inspiration to a dead airman. I leaned my head against the cold window glass and felt nothing but sorrow. I had no courage left. Out the window, the field slid by, empty and gray. It was evening by the time I reached Maggie's school. The blackouts were already up, so no one could see me walk down the drive. I knew there had to be rules and manners about boarding schools. I didn't know any of them. I didn't care. I told the girl who answered the door that I needed to see the head, and told the head I wanted Maggie. When Maggie saw me, her face went milk white. She stumbled, and I thought for a moment she was going to faint. She's okay, I said. I grabbed Maggie by the shoulders and held her to me. She gasped and started to sob. She's not, my mother, you wouldn't have come, she's not. She just needs you. I've come to take you home. Wow. Way to go, Ada. Chapter 61. It was against the rules for Maggie to leave without the right kind of permission. I didn't care. I felt like Susan must have felt when she decided that, permission or not, I was going to have my surgery. I've come to take Maggie home, I said. You have to let me. The head continued to protest. Maggie looked desolate. I should have written myself a letter that I could have pretended came from Lady Thornton. Too late for that now. If you speak to Maggie's mother on the telephone, I said. There's no phone at the cottage where we're living, but there is one at the stables. Maggie's eyes widened. The head considered. If I speak to her myself, she said. All right. The head showed me to a telephone, and I rang the Thornton stables. I knew how from when Susan was in hospital. Grimes, I said, when Fred answered. This is Ada Smith. I need you to fetch Lady Susan. The head of Miss Margaret's school is going to call you back in half an hour, and Lady Susan needs to be there to take the call. Ada, said Fred. Maggie called him Grimes. She'd grown up doing so, but I never had. From the first day I'd known him, he was always Fred. Yes, I said firmly. I'm at Miss Margaret's school. The headmistress is going to call back in half an hour, and she needs to speak to Lady Susan. Fred said, You went to fetch Maggie? Yes. I could hear him grinning down the phone line. I'll fetch Lady Susan then, half an hour. Lady Thornton's first name was Eleanor, but she wasn't ever called Lady Eleanor. Somehow that meant something different from Lady Thornton. I was counting on Maggie's head, not knowing Lady Thornton's first name. Call them back in 30 minutes, I said to the head, hanging up the telephone. Margaret and I will be spending the night here. We'll leave tomorrow morning. We'll need a ride to the train station so we can take her trunk. I reached for Maggie's hand. Come, we'll start packing. I mean, who does Ada sound like? Sounds like Lady Thornton, doesn't she? We'll need a ride to the train station. Okay, Ada. Way to go. Maggie didn't say a word until we'd climbed 3 flights of stairs, and then she said, Ada, that was marvelous. I don't know what we were thinking, I said. I should have done this long ago. When Maggie gathered her things, one of the other girls asked me, Where do you go to school? My mother teaches me at home. The girl sighed. Lucky, she said. It was past supper time, but a thick-set woman came up to offer me something to eat. Maggie went down with me, back to the head's office, where there was a plate of sandwiches, and the head herself poured us cups of tea. Your mother said she was sorry to make us go to the trouble of phoning, she told Maggie. She said she's been terribly upset. That's why she sent Ada. Yes, I said. I told them about the fire watching, the steeple, the airplane, and the pilot burned inside. You must have been terrified, the head said. I was, I said, and it didn't matter. Fear and what you did with it were 2 separate things. Wow. On the last train, Maggie dozed. I watched the hills of Kent appear outside the train windows, rising up then stretching down toward the sea, the way they'd been when I'd seen them for the first time, the way they'd always been, war or no war. Susan was waiting at the station. She hugged me hard and tight. Were you worried? I asked her. No, your note said to trust you, and I did. She looked at me searchingly. But why didn't you explain? I was afraid you'd try to stop me, I said, and I knew I was right. Maggie didn't need to be safe as much as she needed her mother, and Lady Thornton needed Maggie too. Susan looked thoughtful. I wouldn't have stopped you, she said. In the living room, Lady Thornton leaned against Maggie and wept. It made Jamie nervous, so I took him into the kitchen and taught him how to make Lord Woolton pie, while Susan made us all some tea. I let Jamie decide how many turnips to add. Jamie loved turnips. Some things are very sad, I said to him, but you were right. Our cave is big enough for everyone. Will Lady Thornton stop crying? He asked. I don't know, I said. She's always going to be sad about Jonathan. I rubbed his head. It's okay to feel sad. I mean, now Ada sounds like Susan. This is awesome. My own emotions were such a jumble. I'd known the right thing to do, and I'd done it. I'd helped take care of Lady Thornton the way she helped take care of me. I'd stood in the steeple while bombs and even an airplane had fallen past me out of the sky. I'd felt afraid, but I hadn't come undone. My foot would never be all the way right, but I could walk and climb and run. My feelings might never be all the way right either, but they were healed enough. I lay in my bedroom that night, awake while Maggie snored from her bed, and I thought about everything I'd been fighting, everything I'd lost and won. Then I got up, put on my slippers, and went out the door. Susan was still awake in her bed, reading. When I came into the room, she smiled. She held up the edge of her blankets, and I slid into the pocket of warmth beside her. I didn't say anything. I just breathed, and so did she. Aww. Chapter 62. Lady Thornton never once argued with me about bringing Maggie home. She must have been aching for Maggie all along. Lord Thornton came home for the weekend a few weeks later. He brought a big square tin of a new type of American meat. Spam, Lord Thornton said, stands for spiced ham. The grocer said it was like sausage. Lady Thornton raised an eyebrow. And what did it cost? Lord Thornton grinned. 16 points. Food that was rare or unusual was rationed on a point system now. Each person had 16 points per month to spend on whatever they could find. Lady Thornton shook her head at him and caught Susan's eye. It's the lamb chops all over again. You've got lamb chops? Lord Thornton asked. No, we do not, said Lady Thornton. These children need to eat meat more often than that. Okay, everybody's acting like everybody else. Everybody has learned something positive from everybody else. Because now Lady Thornton sounds like Susan. And get this. Lady Thornton took the can of spam and opened it, sliced the meat, and fried the slices for our supper. It was delicious. Why is that crazy? Yeah, Lady Thornton's making dinner. She's grown a lot. We've been learning more about Hitler, Lord Thornton said while we ate, about what he's doing in this war. We all looked at him. You mean besides fighting the entire world? Asked Susan, her eyebrows raised. Lord Thornton nodded. It's not exactly open knowledge, he said. Not top secret, of course, but nothing you'll see on the newsreels for a while. He paused. I don't think I'd better share the details, but I can say that we're learning things about Hitler and what he's doing in Europe to captured civilians and even to his own countrymen that make this war seem extremely necessary. More than necessary. Right. Do you mean like to Ruth's family? I asked. Yes, Lord Thornton said. He paused again. I'll never say Jonathan's death was worth it. I can't say that. But I can say that I know for sure that Jonathan died fighting for the side of right. I can say that no one on our side will have died in vain. He patted Maggie's hand. That comforts me, he said. Lady Thornton took a deep breath. Perhaps. Not me, said Maggie. Not yet, said Lord Thornton. It may someday. That night, Maggie asked me to tell her about my mother. Everything, every little thing, details I'd never told anyone, not even Susan. I told her my few faded memories of my father. I told her about Jamie growing up and the threat of him going to school. I told her how I taught myself to walk on my twisted, ruined ankle, smearing blood across the floor of our single, cramped room, then wiping it up with a rag. Remember that. I'm going to be like you, Maggie said. I'm going to let you teach me to be brave. I snorted. Oh, who's brave? Remember the day you fell off a barn and he jumped into Susan's field? You were brave enough to ride him alone down the road, even though you hated him. We both laughed, remembering. You swore like a sailor, I said. I could almost hear her grinning in the dark. Sometimes I still do. Then, very quietly, she reeled off a string of swear words. She knew an awful lot of them. I said, you'd survive on a London lane. We'd both survive, Maggie said. We're surviving now. After a long pause, I laughed again. We're doing better than that, I said. I think we won. Chapter 63, May 22nd, 1943. Over a year later. Jamie stuck his head into the kitchen. Ready? He asked. I tucked the last of our sandwiches into a basket. I added the thermos of tea. Ready, I said. In the big room, Susan was putting on her hat. I'm not sure about this, she said. Is this trip truly necessary? I laughed. For Jamie's 9th birthday, we'd gone to London Zoo, all of us, including Lady Thornton and Maggie. That trip had probably not been truly necessary, but it had been fantastic. Jamie loved the animals every bit as much as I thought he would. Now it was 6 months later. I'd turned 14 the week before. Wow. And while Jamie and Maggie had decorated the table with flowers like usual, and I breakfasted on a piece of bacon and an egg, I hadn't gotten any presents because I had told Susan I knew exactly what I wanted. It was this day, and I was in charge of it. Yes, Mom, I said. This trip is necessary. Oh, yay! Is that where it is? Yes, Mom. Aw, she does it! Yay! So subtle. The author just kind of threw that in. Boy, you got to be paying attention with this author. I like that. We had waited for a Saturday so we wouldn't miss school. The village children had started returning the year before. The village school reopened in the fall, and Susan taught there part-time. She also tutored a new boy for his college entrance exams, but he boarded with the vicar, which was good because it meant we still had a spare room for when Ruth came home on leave. We were still at war with Germany. We all still took shifts fire watching in the steeple. Rationing was tighter than ever. A camp of American soldiers lived down the road near our old bombed house. Jamie and his schoolmates liked to visit them, and Jamie could imitate their accent to perfection. I'd finally gotten 2 letters from Stephen. They were short, but at least I knew he and his father were still alive. Oh, yay! That's good. At the train station, Jamie made Susan stand to one side while I bought the tickets. We didn't want her to know where we were going. I hope this isn't an overnight excursion, she said. We just grinned at her. Outside the train windows, the hills rolled by, green with spring grass. I wondered whether Susan knew the route well enough to guess where we were going, but I don't think she did, because when the conductor announced the stop for Becky's hometown, Susan's face went white. Her smile faded. I'm not sure. I tugged her arm. Come on, Jamie said. We want to see her too. Becky's village church was bigger than the one in our village, but it was made of the same brown stone with the same sort of wall around the cemetery. The headstones looked like the ones in our graveyard, marching down the grass in solemn, perfect rows. I don't even know where she is, Susan said. We walked slowly, reading the names until we found her. Rebecca Daphne Montgomery, April 11th, 1909 to September 5th, 1936. Beloved daughter, beloved friend. Becky's stone looked like every other stone. There wasn't anything special about it, but underneath the dirt was Becky, or at least her earthly remains. Her soul, of course, was in heaven. I decided to believe in heaven. I like to think of Mam there, calm and happy at last, fully and eternally capacitated, along with Jonathan and Ruth's grandmother and Stephen's family. Now I opened the basket that held our sandwiches and took out the flowers I'd cut from the hedgerows that morning. They were bedraggled and limp, the sort of flowers you had to make do with in war. I laid them at the base of Becky's stone. Jamie dug into his pocket, pulled out one of his tin soldiers, and stood up beside the flowers. Aw, Jamie. Probably little one, like, saluting, keeping watch over Becky. That's such a Jamie thing to do. Susan dabbed her eyes. Do you want to say a prayer or something? I asked. She nodded. We moved a little way away to give her privacy. Look, Jamie said, pointing to the stone beside Becky's. It's got the same name. Robert Nathaniel Montgomery, June 24th, 1881 to January 13th, 1940. Oh, said Susan, stepping back to our side. That's Becky's father. I didn't know. He died in the war, I said. I doubt it had to do with the war, Susan said. He was a choleric sort of man. Like he kind of had his illness. I was about to ask what that meant when a disbelieving voice behind us said, Susan? Susan Smith? Is that really you? We turned to see a small, gray-haired woman holding a bouquet of roses. She stared at Susan. Susan blushed. Oh, I'm so sorry, she said. Forgive me, Mrs. Montgomery, I'd given up hope of seeing you, the woman said. I thought you'd never come. She turned her bright eyes to Jamie, then me. And who's this? This is Ada and Jamie, I'd never seen Susan so ill at ease. My children, from the war. She gestured toward the Robert Montgomery tombstone. I'm very sorry. I didn't know. I would have sent a note. The woman nodded. I should have written you. After all, I did know your address. Susan blushed harder. Becky's house, yes, we don't live there anymore. It was hit. I'm afraid a total ruin. Mrs. Montgomery made an exasperated noise. This wretched war. I know I should have written. I suppose I was waiting for you to take the first step. When you never came to visit, I assumed you'd moved on. I didn't think you wanted me to visit, Susan said. I didn't think I would be welcome. Mrs. Montgomery drew in her breath. Perhaps not by my husband, I'll admit. But you and I, we could have always sat in the garden, you know. We could have talked about her. I would have liked that. I said, "We can do that now." Jamie said, "We love Becky too." A small smile began to spread across the woman's wrinkled face. "Did you?" she said. "Yes," I said. "We can go sit in your garden and talk about why." "Well, so we can," she said. "So we can." She turned on her heel and began to walk away. We followed. "I just bought tea," she said, "and I've got a spoonful or two of sugar and some biscuits I've been saving and jam. I still have half a jar of jam. We'll make tea and sit in the garden." She extended a hand to Jamie. "Now, how do you know Becky? You can't have known her, or I would have known about you." "Susan tells us stories," Jamie said. "Does she? I could tell you some more." I slipped back a step and took Susan's elbow. "You see," I said. Ahead of us, Jamie asked, "Do you have other children?" "No," Mrs. Montgomery said. "No, she was all I had." "I see," Susan said to me. "I can't believe it, but I see." Now Jamie was talking about himself. "A cat named Bovril, and a pig named Mrs. Rochester, and some hens, Petunia, Pansy, and Peter, that's the rooster, and Ada, she's got a pony called Butter." Mrs. Montgomery swung around. "You still have Butter?" she said. "I do," Susan said. "I sold the Hunters, but I couldn't bear to part with Butter." "Oh, Butter," Mrs. Montgomery beamed. "How I loved Butter. We raised him, you know, from a foal." "I didn't know that," said Susan. "I had so many ponies once upon a time. I could tell you stories about Butter." "You can come visit him," I said. "You could ride him." "Oh, my dear, Ada, is it? I haven't ridden in years." "Well, Butter would take care of you. He took care of me." "That he would," she said. "But please do come," said Susan. "We've plenty of room." Becky's mother stopped walking. She studied Susan and Jamie and me. "I'll come," she said softly. "I will. It would be good to be among family again. You can know things all you like, and someday you might believe them." That's it. What do you think? Will you write me an email if you want and tell me what you think of the ending? I like it. I like how everybody started acting like everybody else. You know, everybody grew in this story, didn't they? Holy moly. Okay, that's nice. I'm going to read the author's note, okay? "I never say so specifically, but Lord Thornton, Ruth's father, and Ruth herself were among the famous code breakers of Bletchley Park who cracked Nazi spy codes, including the unbreakable Enigma." I need to talk to you about that. I keep saying it. "Their work was top secret for years after the war, but is now widely known and fascinating. You can learn more at bletchleypark.org.uk. I'll share that with you. At the end of the story, Lord Thornton says that he has information that makes him feel that the war was entirely justified, that Hitler had to be stopped. Although Hitler's laws against Jews and other groups he deemed undesirable were well known from the start of the war, the full truth about the German death camps and the Holocaust only became public much later and more gradually. By July of 1942, however, the London Daily Telegraph could report that over 1 million Jewish people had already been killed by the Nazis, and at government level, the full horror of the genocide was becoming known. And then she talks, as we've discussed, that it's a difficult and painful topic to research, and she recommends a website, and I'll take a look at it, just see if it's good for you guys. Okay. It says Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, the author, was a longtime Anglophile. It means someone who loves all things English. And she first became interested in World War II evacuees when her mother read Bedknobs and Broomsticks, which I remember that movie. I don't think I've read the book. Bedknobs and Broomsticks. I think that's an old Disney. Wow, that takes me back. It says that she's won some her historical fiction, The War That Saved My Life, won the Newbery Honor, and then she has a new book out, Jefferson's Sons. And she lives with her 2 children and her husband on a 52-acre, you guessed it, horse farm in Bristol, Tennessee. That's fitting, right? Oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. What a journey. I have loved, this has been a favorite thing that I've done. And it's made this all seem, for me at least, less yucky. Because I've been able to share all of this with you. So, like I said, or maybe I didn't, I think maybe I wanted to say, I'm going to start a new book tomorrow, and it's going to be obviously different, but different is good. It can be really good, and it'll just be some more time for us to share together and learn about some new characters. All right, again, shoot me an email if you want to talk to me about this ending. I hope you like it. Okay. I don't really want to push the stop button. There I go. All right. Okay, a new one tomorrow. Even though we don't have school, I'm going to, we have a meeting in the afternoon. We have some grades that we're doing in the morning. I'll fit it in somewhere, okay?